welcome to the Coding Loft. My name is Sam and today we will be making a small fun project. We will create loading bars. So check out the button right here. If I click on it, then you see this loading icon popping in and rotating until we stop the animation again. And there will be some JavaScript, some CSS, and a little bit of HTML. It's a small fun project, so let's get started with HTML. So to get started, we create our project folder. We need an index file, a script file, and a style file. I do have a small script on my computer that I run, which is make web project, and then I just call this loading bars, and it will create a folder and those files. I made a video about how to do that, and I will link it in the description below. Now if I check ls, here's the folder loading bars. You can see it, we go in there, and I have 3 files in there, an index file, script file, and style file. So let's open it up. As you can see, I have already the index file in here where we have our style sheet linked. We have our script down here and it just says my template. And in the styles file, I have a small CSS reset, so the default behavior is the same in all browsers. Now let's delete this line right here and just get started with our first div. So that will be our first div, which we call loading wrapper. And in here will be all of our code. So we have a button, which we give a class of button, and we say start animation. And below that we have another div, which we call loading box. The reason why I call it loading box is because, well, it's kind of a box with 2 rows and 2 columns. And in there we need 4 dots. So we make a div and we call it loading dot, and we need it 4 times. All right, so that's it basically with HTML. Let's open it up with a live server, and we have this extension VS Code, which is called live server. So all you need to do is you right click on the project, say open with live server, and there it is. So you can see right now we only have this button up top, which says start animation. Doesn't look great yet, so let's jump over to our CSS. Now we will leave the reset on top and we'll below start with our project. And we start with the body, give it a background of gray. And I like to use this E2 color. So you can see now it's gray and we want to center everything in the middle. So first we give it a width of 100 viewport width and 100 viewport height. So it basically means that the body element, which is the root element in our project, fills the whole viewport. And then we make display flex, and then we want to center everything. So we say justify content center and align items center. This is just for our project to make sure that the loading bar will sit right in the middle. You can see that the button now moved to the middle. Let's style the button because it doesn't look great right now. So we say .btn, that's the class that we gave it. And we will say a background color of, you can choose anything you like. I have in this case right now 4DE09E, which is a kind of nice green. And then the text color will be white. And we give it some padding, 10 pixels top bottom, 15 pixels left and right, and a margin of 10 pixels and a margin bottom, because we want to move the loading bar a bit more further to the bottom. We will give it of 20 pixels, okay? And now you can see, yes, we want the round corner, so we say border radius of, 20 pixels, and border of none, because right now you still see this kind of old school looking border. There we have our button. Now let's make a hover effect, right? Because the user wants to know if he's interacting with the button or not. So we say cursor pointer and opacity 0.9. So now when I hover over it, you can see this, the cursor changes and the opacity also changes a little. Now let's do the loading element below that. And we start with the wrapper. So we call that loading wrapper. And that's basically the element that spans around our loading element. So we give it a width of 100%. So it spans 100% of the parent element, in this case our body. So completely from left to right, padding of 20 pixels and a background of hashtag FFF, so that's white again. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, just like this. Now we want to center everything, so we say display flex and flex direction column, because we want to stack everything on top of each other. And below that we have align items center and justify content center as well. Now you can see that the bottom is in the middle, and this loading box right here is not on the right, but below it, because we said flex direction column. Now, before we get started with the loading box, let's first show the loading dots, because then you see better what happens when we add the box. So each dot should be around 20 pixels wide and height the same. And then we want the background color. We use the same one that we have for the button. So that was 4DE09E. And now you can see they're stacked on top of each other. So that's why they don't look like dots, but rather like a straight line. So we give it a gap of 5 pixels. Oh no, we do that later with the loading box. Sorry. Here we do a border radius. So we just see that they are dots, and this will make them round. Now the wrapper element around them, we call it loading box, and the reason is because it kind of looks like a box. So we give it a max width of 60 pixels, just in case, and a margin of 20 pixels. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Margin. And below that, we want to display, and now comes the fun part, grid. Now it doesn't look like much yet, but here comes the magic. So if you say grid template columns, 1FR, 1FR, then it will create this box, a box of 2 columns and 2 rows. So 1FR basically means that you have 2 columns of the same size. And to give it a little gap, we say gap 5 pixels. Okay, this starts to look good. Now let's continue with the keyframes, because that's where we start to add in the animations. We say add keyframes, and we call it rotate. And we say we start from 0%, and we will go to 100%. Now what do we want? We start at transform rotate at 0 degrees, so it hasn't moved yet. And then we want to have the scale of, scale of 1. And in here we want to say transform, so we rotate it 360 degrees, and scale is 0.7. So what it does is it rotates this box right here once around itself, and it also makes it smaller. That's what scale does. 1 basically means that's the size right now. .0 is it will scale down to 70% of that. Now it doesn't do anything yet because we need to actually use that animation somewhere. So we'll create an extra class for it, and we said animation, and now we have our animation rotate, and we want to display it for 1 second, ease in out, and infinite, so it keeps repeating, and alternate. Let's do this one again, infinite, so like this. You see it still doesn't move because we now need to add this class somewhere, and that's what we will do with JavaScript later. But for now we'll just leave it here, rotate, so you can see that it works. Right, once we have the class applied to the box, it will start to rotate 360 degrees and at the same time scale down to 70%. So let's jump over to the JavaScript. Now at first we get the elements that we need. So we need a button because we need to listen when we click it. Document.query selector, and we gave it a class of .btn. Then we want the loading box equals document.query selector, and the class was called loading box. And then we also want to have a variable called isLoading, and we set it to false because we will start out not showing the loading bar. Then we need the event listener. So we need the event listener on the button. So we say button.add event listener, and we want to listen for a click event. And once there is a click, we want to fire a function. And what does the function do? Well, first of all, let's see if it actually tracks everything correctly. So we say console.log clicked, We open up our developer tools and we open the console right here. Now when we press the button, it says clicked. Okay, that seems to work. Now what we want to do is we want to check if it's already loading or not. So we say if it is not loading, meaning that the loading bar is not showing, we want to start the loading animation. And that's a function that we will create in a second. Else, if it is loading and we click the button, then we want to stop the animation. Stop loading animation. And then we also want to change the button text. Because once we click it, we don't want to see start animation, but stop animation. Now let's create a start animation. And the way that we do it is we say function start loading animation. And what do we want to do? First of all, when we click start loading animation, we don't see anything. So in the CSS, we need to set display grid for the loading box back to none. Okay? So we don't see it at all. And in the index file, we take away the rotate class because we don't start rotating. Okay, so we click the button and we want to start the loading animation because is loading is false. So what will happen? First of all, we say is loading now is true, because now we have a loading animation. And how do we show it? We say loading box dot style dot display equals grid. So now when we press the button, it will change back from display none to grid. So now I press start animation and yeah, it displays. But we don't just want to display it, we also want to rotate it. So we just say loading box dot class list dot add. Now we add our rotate class. So that will add the animation. But now we need to stop it. So we create a stop loading animation and we say, well, once we click that, right? So once the animation is going and we want to click it again to stop it, we say is loading now is back to false. And we just do the opposite of what we did above. So we say loading box dot style dot display equals none. And then we also remove the rotate class. Okay, let's check it out. And it works. It continues loading until I click it again. But as you can see right here, change button text, which we have here, is not defined yet. So again, we say function change button text. And we want to change the button text depending on whether we are loading or not. So if is loading equals true, which means that we have clicked the button, then we want to change the button text, button.text content, to stop animation. Else if, meaning when the opposite is true, so is loading is false, meaning it has either not started yet or we have clicked the button to stop the animation. Then we want to say button.text content equals start animation. So let's see if that works. Start animation, it says stop animation, the loading bar starts to spin and it disappears. And that's how you can create a very simple loading animation. If you did like this video, please leave a comment and a like down below. Subscribe to the channel and see you back for the next videos.